What's up top 10 fam, hope you're having an awesome day. I'm your host Ayman Hasan and welcome back to another video. Now I usually write my intros before writing the content of the videos, but with this one I just decided to do the intro at the very end. No real reason, I just wanted to. And I honestly don't even know how to describe the atrocities that have taken place in the houses we're about to talk about. Each case is unique, it's interesting, it's brutal and vicious, and you may want to sit down for it. So these are the top 10 scary homes you should never move into. Starting us off with number 10 is the VILLISCA Axe murder house. Do I even need to tell the story of this one? After hearing the name, I'm sure none of you would even want to move in. But either way, located in VILLISCA in southwestern Iowa, the house was home to the Moore family, which included the parents Josiah and Sarah and their 4 children. On the 10th of June 1912, one of the children invited 2 friends to spend the night at the Moore house after a children's day at the church. They all got home at around 10 p.m. and that was that. The next day at 7 a.m. the Moore's neighbor Mary got worried because she didn't see any of the Moores do their morning chores. She knocked on the door and no one answered. Josiah's brother also tried opening the door after getting a call from Mary, but to no avail. Thankfully, he did have a spare key and he went inside. When he opened the guest bedroom door, he found the bodies of the 2 guests lying on their beds. He called the police immediately, and after investigation it was found the entire family and the 2 friends were bludgeoned to death with an axe. Apparently the killer or the killers had been waiting in the attic, and as soon as everyone fell asleep, they struck. Josiah was axed the most out of everyone. His face was so disfigured even his eyes were missing. The blade was only used on him and the blunt part was used on the rest of the family. The culprit or the culprits were never found, and after that point the home is considered one of the most haunted ones in America. People even pay $400+ to stay there for a single night. But these guests report hearing children's voices and seeing objects just fly across the room. A paranormal investigator even stayed there in 2014 and then stabbed himself after spending the night. Need I say more? Don't go there. Coming in at number 9 is LEMP Mansion. Located in St. Louis, Missouri, this mansion has seen its fair bit of tragedy, probably enough tragedy for a lifetime. The mansion has 33 rooms altogether and was built by William LEMP sometime in the 1860s. William and his wife had 4 sons, and after their youngest Frederick died, William ended up committing suicide in 1904 shortly after. So death count right now is 2, just keep that in mind. A few years later, William's wife died of cancer in the house, death count 3, and by 1922 William Jr. ended up shooting himself in the same room his dad committed suicide in, death count 4. If that honestly isn't horrible enough, in 1949 William's 3rd son Charles shot his dog in the basement of the house and then went up to his bedroom and killed himself. Death count, final, 6. The house ended up being sold the same year and turned into a boarding house when obviously the hauntings began. Honestly, that many people can't die in a house for there to be no hauntings. Safe to say you'll find me in no rush whatsoever to move into the LEMP Mansion. No thank you. At number 8 we have the previous tenant. Now this story was shared by an anonymous person, so sadly I can't give him credit, but the show must go on. Now this woman had just moved into her first apartment with her boyfriend, and then she heard the doorknob moving like someone was unlocking it. She didn't think anything of it since she just assumed it was her boyfriend that came home, but then she looked at the time. It was 8:30 p.m. and usually he was meant to come home at 10:30, so something just wasn't right. She looked out the window and she couldn't see his car or anything, and that's when she started to panic. Someone kept trying to open the door, but it wasn't working. A few minutes later they stuck some metal between the door to try and pry it open, and that failed as well. The girl was freaking out at that point like anyone would, and so she called 911 and hid in her bathroom with a knife. Good call, honestly, always arm yourself. I've never been in this position, but I would arm myself too. The person tried to pry the door open for at least 30 minutes before giving up, and when police got there they found an old man roaming the area with a crowbar and a knife. Apparently he was the old tenant of the apartment and he wanted all his stuff back that the new couple couples had apparently stole. They didn't steal anything, he was just very delusional, and if I was her in the bathroom, I would literally be sending my last text messages to all my loved ones. Just imagine being at home, hearing someone trying to come into your house and kill you and take your stuff. Filling our number 7 slot is the Bell Witch Farm. Now this is more legend than it is confirmed, but I feel like there are just way too many intricate details in the story for it to just be mere folklore, but let me know what you guys think. Located in Robertson County, Tennessee, John Bell Sr. lived on his farm with his family, and this story focuses on just friendly neighborly war gone very wrong. Now John's neighbor Kate Batts believed he had cheated her out of quite a bit of land, and clearly she was determined to stay salty about it forever because while on her deathbed she promised to haunt John for the rest of her life and his. Soon after, the Bell family became the targets of some of the worst haunting of all time. They would hear chains dragged across their floor, their servant would be followed by a massive black dog looking apparition when he went to visit his wife. John saw a massive creature who he shot at but then who disappeared into thin air. The family would hear the sound of gnawing on their beds, the growls of invisible dogs fighting. John even started being physically haunted when his mouth just started to paralyze itself at random times. The children were then attacked when the sheets were pulled from their beds and they were literally flipped out of their beds while asleep. Kate's ghost would just scratch the children, and she hated John's youngest daughter Betsy the most. She would slap her, stick pins into her like it was a proper vengeance act, and all that for a bit of land. Like, Kate, you are dead, please move on. Now at number 6 is the Joshua Ward House. Located in Essex County, the house belonged to Sheriff George the Strangler Corwin back in the day. And he may not ring a bell, but he was the high sheriff of the county during the Salem witch trials, and I feel like everyone knows what that is. He was known throughout the country to strangle the accused by tying necks and heels, which basically means he would force the person's body into hoops, and then he would rope their neck to their feet until blood came gushing out of their mouth and their nose. Everyone honestly hated this man. He even stoned an 8-year-old farmer to death who refused to stand trial for witchcraft. He's 80 years old. Anyway, 4 years later, George had a heart attack and died. His family was so scared a riot crowd would dismember his body that they interned his body in their house's cellar. The house is now a bed and breakfast called the Merchant and is apparently one of the most haunted houses in New England. And I'm not even surprised, this dude pissed off so many people and killed them in such gruesome ways. If I was one of his victims, I'd make sure no one enjoyed being in that house ever again. And since I'd be dead, I'd have forever to spend doing it. Coming in at number 5 is the Lizzie Borden house. Located in Fall River, Massachusetts, the house is home to the Borden family in the late 1800s. Lizzie's father Andrew and her stepmother Abby were found axed to death in the house, and Lizzie scandalously became the main suspect. Also, this is the second axe murder on the list, taking place in the 1800s. Like, why was axe such a weapon of choice back in the day? Such a brutal weapon. I feel like people who use axes really enjoy seeing the bloodshed. Anyway, I drifted off. Lizzie had a long and brutal trial, but she was acquitted of both murders and then later refused to live in her family home. Lizzie and her sister Emma moved into another house they named Maplecroft, and she lived there until she died. These days, the house operates as a bed and breakfast, and funnily enough, the most requested room to lodge in is the room where Abby's body was found. You people are freaks! Apparently, guests have heard a maid screaming for help late at night and the cackling of Lizzie. Her axed parents' ghosts are also known to wander around the property. If any of you guys been there, let me know. And why are all these murder houses being turned into bed and breakfasts? Surely there's better property than that. Surely. At number 4 is the House of Death, and I didn't even make up that title, that's actually what it's called, I swear to God. Located in Greenwich Village, New York, this house was constructed way back in the 1850s, and a record 22 people have died in this house. And yes, that means the house is also haunted by 22 ghosts, which is around 23 ghosts more than I'd like. Anyway, Mark Twain lived in the house at the beginning of the 1900s, and his ghost is said to be seen on the first floor near the staircase. The family home was turned turned into a 10-unit apartment building, and the first couple that moved in there felt a monstrous moving shadow looming over them at all times. The actress Jan Bartel, who felt the shadow, wrote a memoir about her experiences at the house, how she felt hands brushing her neck and this rotting odor that was just always present. She'd have visions of seeing people, and when the couple called a medium, the person felt many dead things under the floorboards, whether that was a dead girl or a cat perhaps, and after hearing that, the couple left very soon after. Former attorney Joel Steinberg moved into the place a few years later and beat his partner's 6-year-old daughter into a coma, after which she died. Residents have seen the ghosts of that little girl, another lady in white, another one in black, a grey cat, and just many, many more. Safe to say, unless these 22 ghosts are paying rent, I'm not sharing a house with them. Thank you, next. Filling our number 3 slot is the Los Feliz mansion. Why do so many bad things happen at mansions? Like, do rich people just attract murder? I'm very confused. Anyway, the mansion is located on a hilltop in LA, and boy, oh boy, does it have a brutal past. During the 1950s, the mansion was owned by Dr. Harold Perelson, his wife, and their 3 children. On the night of December 6, 1959, something came over Harold that people are still unable to explain 50 years later. He went downstairs and beat his wife to death with a hammer. He then moved on to one of his daughters and severely beat her too, but thankfully not to death. After these random acts of violence, Harold decided to commit suicide by drinking a mix of acid, water, and tranquilizer pills. After the horrific incident, the mansion was bought a year later as a storage site, but no one lived there for the next 50 years. Neighbors remember seeing the couple who bought the house move boxes into the mansion, but they never stayed the night. The couple's son Rudy inherited the house, and although he has no plans to sell it, he still has no plans to live there either. No one has been invited into the home after the murders, but trespassers and adrenaline junkies do come there. Like, they have picnics in the decaying garden. They've even tried to break in. And the real reason they want to see it is because the Perelsons' furniture is all still in there. Like, if you look through the window, you can see the 50s style TV, a Christmas tree with gifts underneath it, and it's just exactly the same as it was that fateful night, except covered in dust and death. Now, people speculate Harold did it because of financial troubles, while others say they found documents of him having been secretly hospitalized in his past. Whatever the case, his children actually survived the ordeal and haven't been in the media since. Not that you have the option to move into this house since it's owned by Rudy, I just wouldn't do it. Now at number 2 is the KREISCHER mansion. Now, the mansion is located on Staten Island in New York and was built by German immigrant Balthasar KREISCHER back in 1885. The house is a 2.5-story beauty. It has a bunch of verandas, decorative railings, tall chimneys. It's just very cute. Anyway, the man had 2 sons, Edward and Charles, and in 1894 Edward shot himself in his right temple, dying instantly. His ghost has been seen all over the property for decades, but it just gets worse than that. Now, his ghost has been seen all over the property for decades, but it gets a lot worse. The family business burned down during the Great Depression and they lost everything. By 1998, the property was bought in order to be restored. It was sold again, and in 2005, a horrible mob killing took place inside the home. The caretaker of the home was found out to be a hitman for the Bonanno crime family, which was one of the major families in the American mafia at the time. Now, the person killed was a rival mob associate called Robert McKelvey. Apparently, Robert had a big mouth and owed one of the associates, Gino Galastro, a lot of money. He was lured to the KREISCHER mansion, and kudos to him, he put up quite a fight against the 5 people he was up against, one being Gino, who was also a mafia soldier. Don't even know what a mafia soldier is, didn't even know they existed. Either way, the 5 failed to strangle him to death, so they stabbed him, then dragged his body to the pond and then drowned him. They then dismembered his body with a hacksaw and incinerated all of it in the mansion's furnace. Now, the owners of the mansion had no clue this had even happened. They were in the middle of developing the house into an assisted living center for old people and had recently replaced the furnace. That's so innocent. Like, I love how they just had no idea what was going on. Cute. cute. And finally, at number 1 is the Menendez murder home. Other than the murder of Sharon Tate and Nicole Brown Simpson, this is probably one of the biggest Hollywood murder cases ever. And honestly, not that I know who Jose and Kitty Menendez were since they were before my time, but I'm sure a lot of you probably do. Now, Jose was a self-made Cuban millionaire and the executive vice president at an independent film company. The couple and their sons Eric and Lyle were renting a house in Beverly Hills while renovations were being done on their actual home. Now, the 2-story house has 9,000 square feet of living space and takes up just about half an acre of land. It has a private tennis court, it has pools, a 2-story guest house, and Elton John even rented it at one point. On the night of August 20th, 1989, 2 suspects entered the home with a shotgun and shot Jose and Kitty to death. The culprits? None other than their 2 sons Eric and Lyle. Now, it said Jose was very demanding of his sons, making them meet impossible standards, and Kitty was suffering from an array of things: depression, drug addiction, and alcoholism. The brothers were sentenced to life in prison for the murders, and their trial was highly publicized on TV. The brothers had had run-ins with the law before, but since their dad basically shat money, it was never a problem. Described as a sociopath, Lyle had a horrible temper and a mean streak, and he was apparently the mastermind behind it all. Eric, on the other hand, was sensitive and quiet, and he's actually the one who confessed to his therapist about the murder. During the 6 months after the murders, the brothers spent $1 million of their parents' money just partying away. Eventually, Eric's therapist told his girlfriend about the murders, who then told the police. Took you long enough. During their trials, the brothers said their parents abused them, but there was little to no evidence of that. I know that was a lot more detail than necessary, but I just found the case so interesting. Like, what would possess you to shoot your own parents when they could give you everything you ever wanted? Even if they couldn't, why would you shoot your own parents? And that's it for today's video, guys. Usually I've heard most of the houses on these lists, like the Amityville house for example, but I was like, no, these are all gonna be ones I've never heard of, and honestly I was pleasantly surprised at how interesting they were, and also pleasantly horrified at what took place in each one. Let me know what you thought in the comments below, and as always, I'm your host Ayman Hasan, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!